Bruce thinks you can't be racist to white people. Bruce thinks you can't be racist to white people. He's being racist himself. You can't be racist. You can be racist to anyone, idiot. We aren't talking about systematic racism. Okay. Without systematic oppression, racism to a otherwise like dominant group is just meanie bobini words. You get that, right? Like, this is a fundamental concept that some people, even long-term community members, cannot comprehend. Okay? Black people aren't upset because the N-word is a mean word. Black people aren't upset because like it hurts their feelings. It's because it is a reinforcement of the white supremacist systems that they currently are forced to live in. Okay? It also comes with like 500 years of baggage. That's the problem. It's not just, oh man, I'm so sensitive. And a lot of white people, for some reason, and I even understand where they're coming from when they don't get it, but like a lot of white people don't get this. They just think it's like a mean word. And that like, that is the reason why, people their feelings get hurt. And that's the problem. It's like, no, that's not the reason. Okay. That's why when you talk about like heterophobia or when you talk about anti-white racism, it's a laughable concept. Okay. It's laughable because no white person has been harmed by virtue of being white. It's never happened at a systemic level because whiteness as a concept was used as a political tool as your proximity from blackness. It goes back to the one drop rule. It goes back to slavery. Whiteness was basically an overarching umbrella that like Anglo-Saxons decided to add first the French people, then the Germans, which they originally declared to be too swarthy to be considered white, then the Scandinavians, then ultimately the Greek and the Italians, which are not white, of course, still to this day, in my opinion. And then, the Slavs, and then the Jews. Okay? This is an ever-expanding umbrella of people. And now Latinos as well. Now, the only group of people that will never be white are black people, because at its root, whiteness is about not the color of your skin, but about your proximity to blackness. Okay? That's why throughout history, there were plenty of people who were not considered white that are now firmly within the white category. Okay? That's just how it works. Whiteness is about power. When you're white, you can track your ancestral lineage down to the mother Ellis Island, down to the mother generations of barbarians. I'm Turkish. I'm white. I come from a country with a history of imperialism, right? The Ottoman Empire. I know what my grandfather's great-great-great-great-grandfather did. You understand? Black people in this country, especially African descendants of slaves, do not have that privilege. And that is precisely why they were forced to create a homogenized black culture, which is rooted in intergenerational struggle and oppression, because black people in this country can't trace back their ancestors because they didn't come here on their own volition. They were brought here as slaves. They were raped, they were sold, they were trafficked, they were killed, they were murdered, and they were enslaved. So that is the reason why there's a difference between black culture, for example, which is an identifiable, tangible thing, and white culture, which is not. That's why people make jokes about white culture. That's why people don't make jokes about black culture in the same vein. Okay? This is a complicated process to understand. So I want to be as charitable as possible to those who don't get it. Okay? But that's the reason why Bruce doesn't believe you can be racist to white people. Okay? What? Overcooked at this point? L-Take, what about Native Americans? White people were also sold into slavery, same as blacks. White people were also sold into slavery. Yes, it has. Yeah, I mean, I can't address that. Like, that is like entirely different. Okay, indentured servitude and chattel slavery are significantly different from one another. Please stop making this comparison. No one in history makes this comparison. Okay? You just sound like a idiot when you say that. You have subscribers from before Ritzgate that still feel this way. People just sub and not listen to you speak. Like, how does this opinion exist from a 22-month sub? I think they just pick and choose. They don't want to hear it. Here, I'm going to untime him out. I want to hear if he changes his mind in any capacity whatsoever. Okay? Yes, you can be mean to individual white people, and it's up. You shouldn't automatically make that assumption that makes you a mean person, right? In a lot of instances, it's a self-defense mechanism. I talk about it all the time. Marginalized communities regularly put up self-defense shields because of the experience of living in a white supremacist society, because of the experiences that they've had. They're doing it for self-defense, which is still, it's not great, especially when you are doing it to someone who doesn't deserve it, right? And that's mean, and that's discriminatory, okay? But as far as like black people being racist, black people can be racist. Black people are racist sometimes, for sure. But the type of racism that black people engage in is not anti-white racism. It's white supremacist anti-black racism. It's internalized racism as a consequence of growing up in the American schooling system, in the American dominant cultural hegemonic attitudes towards white supremacy and how normalized it is. There's a reason why even black people come into this community and go, what the fuck? I never learned about the move bombing. You know what I mean? In 1985, when a Pennsylvania city block was literally destroyed with C4 dropped from a helicopter because the Africa family was living there. You know, that's like, there are people who are oblivious. There are black people who are oblivious to black history in this country. And that's because they learn white education. Okay? That is white supremacy. That's a byproduct of living in a white supremacist society. It is by design. That's why you have black people that have anti-black sentiment, for example. So yes, black people can be racist. Okay? Black people can also be like discriminatory towards other races that are non-white as well. Okay? Everyone can. But when we talk about like the racism that we experience or the racism that we understand as like racism, it has some form of power structure behind it. Okay? It has a systemic root, because without systemic oppression or any sort of like contemporary oppression associated with it, then it's just mean words. You're just mean. You're a mean person, you know? That's why I always use the Karen example when we talk about this. Nobody says Karen is the K word, right? The quintessential white lady calling the manager or calling the cops on a black person, you know? No one would turn around and go, this person, you, Karen. Wow, well, that person actually is being racist to white women. And as a matter of fact, he should be banned. Or that person is being misogynistic and racist to a white woman. White Latino and white Latinos could be extremely racist. I mean, even, dude, not just white Latinos. Latinos could be extremely racist too. There's also colorism. There are a million different issues. But when we're talking about a black person saying the word cracker, like there is, no matter how much energy you put behind that, most people will always understand that ultimately it's just not a real thing, not a real issue. You get it? You can try to go with like the dictionary definition, Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of racism, all you want, okay? Of course, I know the difference between systematic racism versus someone being mean to someone and using slurs pejorative to refer to their skin color. I can't type. Okay, if you understand the difference between those two, what the fuck are you like riding for this? Why are you riding for this? I say this all the time about women radfems that say shit like, do you think black people deserve reparations? Yes. I don't know why you're asking this question currently, but yes, I do. But for example, I talk about like radfems, right? The kill all men. Men are toxic. Kill all men, radfems, right? Fucking annoying. They're rad libs. They're annoying. They're stupid. They're silly. Who gives a shit? Ultimately, okay? There is no like mass neutering of men movement occurring in society, and you have to be like an insane person if you believe that is happening. It's like getting upset and genuinely making a political movement out of like a bunch of psychos chirping with no power whatsoever. It's people that are lashing at whatever they can because they are living with a sense of powerlessness every fucking day. It doesn't even make their concerns valid. Some of them might be, but it doesn't make their concern or their sentiments valid. But it doesn't matter. Ultimately, it doesn't. And it's the exact same thing as like, you know, someone using the word cracker. Like, what the do you mean? You think there's like serious anti-white racism happening? I think legitimizing this notion that like the C word, especially a funny concept, because like when you go out there and say the C word and like, it'll be the 7th word that people think is like an actual slur. You got like 3 better ones before you get to that. You know what I mean? Like, but the C word, right? Making a movement out of that, making it like giving it any kind of legitimacy as though it's like a powerful word that is an anti-white slur is really counterproductive, and it's capitulating to white supremacists who often take on this conversation and weaponize it. It is no different than the Quran burning Nazi guy. When he's burning the Quran, he's not doing it specifically to be like, fundamentalist Muslims are actually, genuinely devastating to their own communities. And I think that Islam has a lot of reformation that it needs to go through. They're doing it specifically because other people are going to get on board with that. And they're going to go, it's free speech, these Muslims. You're right. You get it? And some people, unfortunately, do jump to that. They do rush to that, and they get baited, hook, line, and sinker. So when you sit here and try to legitimately defend the concept of anti-white racism, when you sit there and try to defend that shit, you are kind of oblivious to the defense that you're engaging for people who have other intentions.